Hey, welcome to Five Tool. Thank you so much for joining us once again. My name is Jason, and I'm so glad that you chose to spend a little bit of time with us here today. Today, we're going to kind of continue and actually wrap up our series on just talking about a few elements that we can master or at least improve to have you the best year of your life. At least take a step forward from what 2018 was for you. So far, we've talked about how to master your feelings. We've talked about how to master your friends and your family and your relationships. Today, I want to talk about maybe one of the driving forces of our life, and that is very simply faith. I want to talk about our faith. Now, today's focus verse, if you will, is found in Hebrews 11:6. We're going to spend a lot of time unpacking this today, but I want to just kind of give you the text first, then we're going to talk a little bit, and then I want to unpack it a little bit more for you at the end, because this is a powerful verse. Hebrews 11:6, it simply says this: without faith, it is impossible to please God. It's a pretty big statement. Without faith, it is impossible to please God. And then the author goes on to say this: anyone who wants to come to God must believe that God exists and that he rewards those who sincerely seek him. So in this short verse here, what we have is a very bold statement. It's impossible to please God without faith. Impossible. But then he kind of gives us almost a how-to guide. How do we please God with faith? And what I want to do today is talk about faith a little bit, and then give you some practical tools, just a few of them, of how you can really grow in your faith this year. And I think first what we need to do is really understand what faith is. How do we define faith? I'm going to give you a biblical definition, and then I'm going to give you kind of my own definition that I like to work off of and live off of. First, in Hebrews 11:1, it's just the very beginning of the chapter we just read from, biblical definition of faith is simply this. It shows the reality of what we hope for, and it is the evidence of things that we can't see. It shows the reality of things we hope for, and it gives us the reality of things that we can't see. That's the biblical definition of faith. Now, what I like to do with faith is to first look at the opposite of it. You see, I grew up with this idea that the opposite of faith was no faith. That the obstacle to faith, if you will, was having no faith. That's not the case. The opposite of faith, the obstacle of faith, if you will, is actually doubt. You see, what hinders our faith is not wondering if we believe or not. That's not the issue. The obstacle in our faith growth is the doubt that comes into play. The war between trusting and doubting. The war between faith and fear. The war between faith and worry, if you will. All of that doubt comes into play and really confuses us. What's interesting is if you look at the kind of the Latin root word for doubt, it's this word dubium, and it literally is where we get our word double from, or to be double-minded, or to be two-minded, or to be split. That's what it means to doubt, is to be two-minded. So when I think about faith, I like to think of it as being single-minded. Being focused on one thing, being confident in one thing. There may be other options out there, but I'm focused on one single thought, one single idea, one single motivation, and I'm confident in it. That is faith. So as we talk about growing faith, really all we're talking about is decreasing doubt and increasing confidence in God. That's it. We increase our confidence in who God is and what he says he will do to our life and his promises of our life. We increase our confidence that he's going to be there. It may not look the way we want it to look. It may not come out how we thought it would come out, but God is there, and we increase our confidence in that. That is how you grow your faith. Now, if we've defined faith as increasing our confidence, I want to go back to our focus verse, Hebrews 11:6. And I just real quickly want to walk you through this. If we remember right, it starts by saying it is impossible to please God without faith. That's a big statement, man. And it literally means exactly what it says. It's impossible to please God without faith. There is no way to please God without it. It doesn't say it's really hard to please God. It doesn't say that it will be a struggle to please God without faith. It says it is impossible. Well, why is that? You see, I really think what the author's getting at is this idea that God wants all of us. God doesn't just want parts of us, or he doesn't want just parts of our lives or just parts of our heart. He wants all of us. And faith requires that single-mindedness, that one confidence that God, I am yours, you are my God, I believe in you. Now, that leads us to the next statement. Anyone who comes to him must believe that God exists. Now, when you first read this verse, you might think like, well, no kidding, Jason. Like, if we're talking about growing faith, for you to tell me that I must believe God exists seems like an obvious point, right? And I would agree with that statement, except we undervalue what it means. You see, here's what the author is saying. If you want to have strong faith, if you want to have the faith that is pleasing to God, you've got to believe that God exists. And here's what that means. If you believe God exists, it should be evident in your life, in your thoughts, in your words, in your behaviors, in your relationships, the way that you interact with your coaches and your teammates and your parents, the way that you handle when you don't get a call, the way you handle a poor performance, the way you handle wins and losses. We can tell a lot about you and your success just as much as we can tell about you and your failure. If you believe that God exists, it should be evident in the way that you live. There's a great book by a pastor and author named Craig Groeschel called Practical Atheist. And in that book, he says this quote that has stuck with me for years. He says, we live in a world full of people who say they believe in God, but live as if they don't. Listen, I don't want that for you. I don't want you to say that you believe in God just so that you can call yourself a Christian. I don't want that for you. I would rather you keep your mouth shut and you just live like you do believe in God. That's what's going to change lives. That's what's going to take you forward. That's what's going to help you make an impact in your world. Not always with your words. Live out your belief in God, and if necessary, then use words. Does that make sense? I want you to live as if people know you believe in God and that he is a part of your world. That's why the author says, look, if anyone wants to come to him, if anyone wants to be with God, they must believe that he exists. And then the second part of that is they also must believe that he rewards anyone who sincerely seeks him. Now what does that mean? To seek God, it literally means, in the original language here, it means to seek his face, to seek his presence, to pursue his involvement in your life. Now, this is a tricky one. Because what it says is if I really want to grow my faith, I have to acknowledge that I want God to be more involved. I have to acknowledge that I want God to be more present in my life. I'm acknowledging that I want to pursue God knowing that he may lead me places that are uncomfortable, that are scary, but I have a single focus. I have a single mind. I have a single confidence in God. So I'm going to seek him. I'm going to pursue him. I'm going to offer my life and say, God, I want you to be more involved. I want you to be more present. Guys, that's how you grow your faith. Live in a way that says, I believe God exists. And then also live in a way that pursues God even more, that opens the door for even more involvement of God in your life, more influence of God in your life. Well, how do you really seek God? How do you pursue God? And guys, understand it's really all about what you focus on. It is all about what you focus on. What's so interesting in Hebrews 12:2, this is the next chapter after what we've been working in. In Hebrews 12:2, What the author says is that we do this by keeping our eyes set, or keeping our eyes fixed, or locked on is another way to say it. We keep our eyes set on Jesus, who is the initiator or the author or the creator, but also the perfecter of our faith. And I love this because it gives us kind of a guideline of how to grow. You just keep your eyes fixed on Jesus. You keep looking at the right thing. You keep pursuing, you keep focused on the main thing. Everything else, don't let it distract you. You focus on Jesus. But then it throws in this other section that Jesus is the initiator of our faith. He's the one that started this whole thing. But he's also the perfecter. He's also the one that's going to end this whole thing. In the meantime, as I like to call it, we live. And what we do as we live, our normal rhythm of life, is our opportunity to grow our faith. Our opportunity for God to perfect our faith. Now, how is that faith perfected? Guys, listen, you go through the majority of Hebrews 11, what's known as the Hall of Faith. What you are going to read is about several people in their life who are acknowledged and remembered for their faith of doing great things, of doing important things. Sometimes they seem little to us, but they made such a difference in the lives of themselves and those around them that we still talk about it thousands of years later. And the truth is that our faith is perfected by trials. Our faith is perfected by tests. Our faith is perfected by life. I mean, just listen to some of these examples real quick. Abel. His faith was tested by his giving, by his sacrifice. He chose to give the best he could, and he was commended for it. Or what about Noah? Noah's faith was tested by this crazy idea to build an ark because God says it was going to rain. Guys, it had never even rained before that. Noah's building an ark to protect himself from something that has never happened before. That's a little crazy. But his faith earned him a spot in this verse. Or what about Abraham? God tests Abraham's faith by asking him to transition away from his homeland, away from comfort, away from security, and to move his entire family because he has a plan for his life, and he does it. And because of his faith, he is commended. What about Abraham's wife, Sarah? God tests the faith of Sarah by saying, hey, even in your old age, I'm going to provide you a child. I'm going to provide you a child. And through this child, I'm going to keep my promise to birth a nation from you. And she's commended for her faith. What about, let's go to Abraham again. God tests his faith once again by saying, hey, you remember that kid I provided for you? Remember that kid I promised to Sarah? Well, I want you to take that boy named Isaac, and I want you to take him up to the mountainside, and I want you to sacrifice him on the altar to me. And the story goes that he does that in faith, trusting that God will provide, trusting that there's some sense of this test. And just at the right time, God sends a ram that gets stuck in the bushes and challenges Abraham now to release Isaac and sacrifice the ram. But God challenged him in a pretty scary way and was commended by Abraham's faith. What about an interesting choice in this chapter by a girl named Rahab? Rahab isn't one of the spiritual giants that you know about and you read about in Sunday school. She's not one of the Bible stories that we grow up listening at vacation Bible school. We don't do that. See, Rahab was a prostitute. Rahab lived a life that many people in church would just judge and shun and isolate and condemn her. But here she is in the exact same chapter as people like Abraham and Noah. Why? You see, God challenged Rahab's faith by giving her a critical assignment to help two spies take a city. God wanted a city. He sent his people in, but he knew he needed spies to be able to have the advantage. And Rahab enters the story. And Rahab is commended for her faith in God and who he said he was. And here, a prostitute, someone who'd lived a rough life, sketchy past, displays her faith in God, displays her belief in God. And what you see going forward is she starts seeking God. It's an amazing story, guys. But all throughout that chapter, you see people whose faith was perfected, faith was grown through tests. So now some of these tests they're scary, they're crazy, they're make you think about transitions, they make you think about how much you trust God. They make you think about your past and your baggage that you carry around. But are you willing to place your faith above your own baggage? Or what about, like in the case of Abel, God may ask you to give the very best that you can give. You will be tested. But those tests are just a way, an opportunity maybe, for you to display that you believe in God. Because if you believe in God, your life should reflect it. It's a way for you to display that you are going to seek God, that you are going to pursue his presence, that you want his involvement in your life. So God, bring the test. Bring the trials. Because in the midst of those trials, I'm not going to ask you to remove them. I'm not going to ask you to take away the pressure so that I can be comfortable. Instead, God, I believe in you. God, I'm seeking you. And if I'm going to be under pressure, I'm just asking you to grow me and grow my faith in the process. Guys, that is how you grow. My prayer for you this year is that you would learn to master these three things. That you would let faith drive your relationships with your friends and family. That you would let your faith drive your feelings and your emotions and your mental health. That you would let faith creep into every area of your life and let it influence you. We're going to have a great year, 5 Tool. And I'm excited that you are along for the ride. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time. God bless.